You ever feel like you're just drowning in cybersecurity news?
Oh, definitely. It's a constant flood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Breaches, threats.
Yeah, vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
It can be pretty overwhelming.
totally.
Well, today, we're not just going to add to that noise. We want to cut through it, get straight to a really significant and, frankly, persistent threat, one that should be on your radar.
And that threat is APT29. We're doing a deep dive into this Russian state-sponsored hacking group.
Right. You might know them by other names, too, like Midnight Blizzard or maybe Cozy Bear.
Exactly. Those are probably the most common ones.
And for this deep dive, we've waded through quite a bit of material, recent news about what they're up to right now, and also this really fascinating podcast transcript that gives a ton of background technical details.
Yeah, it was quite detailed. So our goal today is pretty straightforward. Understand the danger APT29 poses, how they keep changing their tactics, and importantly, why this actually matters to you.
Even if cybersecurity isn't your day job, right?
Precisely. Because understanding these kinds of advanced threats, it's just becoming more and more crucial for everyone in our, super connected world.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. APT29. Who are they, really?
Fundamentally, they're linked directly to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR.
The SVR, that's Russia's main foreign intelligence agency, like the CIA or MI6, but for Russia.
Exactly, and that link is key. It means we're not talking about independent criminals here. These are operators with state backing, resources, objectives.
And they're not new to the game either. They've been doing this for a while.
A long while. Their documented history goes back to at least 2008, so yeah, they've been around the block.
And their focus is espionage.
Cyber espionage, specifically. They specialize in quietly stealing sensitive information. Think political secrets, government plans, valuable research data, that sort of thing.
So who are they typically going after? Who needs to be most worried?
Well, their primary targets tend to be NATO countries, governments across Europe, defense contractors.
Makes sense.
So think tanks, research institutions, basically anywhere that holds strategic information that an intelligence service would want.
Gotcha. And you mentioned they have a lot of names. Cozy Bear, Midnight Blizzard.
Yeah, it gets confusing. Besides those, they've been called the Dukes, YT Trium, UNC 2452, Nobilium, Solar Storm, even Iron Hemlock.
Wow. Why so many?
It reflects how long they've been tracked, and, different security companies or agencies often assign their own names when they identify a group's activity. It shows how much effort goes into monitoring them.
All right, so that gives us a good picture of who they are. Let's talk about what they've done, some of their big operations.
Okay, two stand out. First, the Democratic National Committee breach, the DNC hack, back in 2015.
Right, that was huge news. But wasn't that another group, APT28, the ones who leaked the emails?
Well, yes, APT28 got the headlines for the leaks, but what's really interesting is that APT29, Cozy Bear, was also inside the DNC network, probably for months before the Louder group showed up.
Really? Doing what?
Their approach was different, much quieter, focused on long-term data exfiltration, grabbing intelligence. So, while one group made noise, APT29 was the silent thief in the background. Classic espionage tradecraft, just digital.
Huh. A real contrast.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second major operation you mentioned?
That has to be the SolarWinds compromise. Came to light in late 2020.
Ah, yes, SolarWinds. That was massive. A supply chain attack. Right.
Exactly. A textbook supply chain attack. Instead of hitting targets directly, they compromised a trusted supplier, SolarWinds, whose software was used by thousands of organizations worldwide.
So they found a back door through a trusted vendor. How'd they manage that?
They managed to inject malicious code into software updates for SolarWinds' Orion platform. It's a popular IT monitoring tool.
So when companies updated their software?
They unknowingly installed APT29's backdoor. It opened a secret channel into all those networks.
The scale must have been incredible. Who got hit?
It was huge. Multiple U.S. federal agencies, Homeland Security, Treasury, others, major tech companies too, like Microsoft, and even the cybersecurity firm FireEye, ironically.
Wow, even FireEye.
Yep. And again, this campaign had several names: UNC 2452, Nobilium, Stellar Particle, Dark Halo. Just shows the complexity of tracking these things.
It really underscores how vulnerable these supply chains can be. Okay, so let's fast forward. What have they been up to more recently, say start of 2024 through to now, April 2025?
Well, they certainly didn't stop after SolarWinds got exposed. They've stayed very active, and they keep adapting. We've seen a few notable things.
Like what?
Well, in February of this year, 2025, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE, they disclosed a breach.
Okay.
Turns out data was stolen from employee Microsoft 365 email accounts, but the breach actually happened way back in May 2023.
May 2023. That's almost 2 years they might have been in there, or at least had access.
It certainly shows their ability to gain access and potentially maintain it for a long time before being detected. They've been notifying people affected by that one.
That's significant persistence. Anything else?
There were also some recent widespread lockouts affecting Microsoft Entra accounts. Now, the initial reports didn't definitively pin that on APT29,
Okay.
but it definitely highlights ongoing issues and potential vulnerabilities in the Microsoft ecosystem, which we know APT29 targets and exploits. So it's something security folks are watching closely.
Right. And it seems like they're also going back to some older tricks, like phishing.
Absolutely. Just this month, April 2025, researchers uncovered a new phishing campaign, and this one's very targeted.
Who's in the crosshairs this time?
European diplomatic entities, embassies specifically, even embassies of non-European countries located in Europe.
So diplomats are the target. What's the lure? What kind of phishing emails are they sending?
This part's pretty interesting, almost mundane. They're impersonating a major European foreign affairs ministry, sending out fake invitations to diplomatic events.
Okay, standard enough.
And the most common theme for these fake events, wine tastings.
Wine tasting. Serious.
Seriously. Fake invites to embassy wine tastings.
That's unexpectedly normal, almost disarming. It's not some complex zero-day exploit notice. It's a social event.
Exactly. And that's likely the point. Lower the target's guard. Blend in with the kind of communications diplomats might actually receive. It shows how they mix social engineering with the technical attack.
So what happens if someone clicks on the link in this wine tasting invitation?
The link leads to the download of a new piece of malware. Security researchers have dubbed it Grape Loader.
Grape loader.
Yeah.
Keeping with the wine theme, I guess. So this is the first step in the infection.
Seems to be, yes. Grape Loader is the initial payload. But what's also significant is that they found a new variant of an existing backdoor, often associated with APT29, called Wine Loader.
Wine loader. Okay, the theme continues. So grape loader gets them in, then maybe wine loader comes next.
That looks like the sequence. Grape Loader does the initial reconnaissance, figures out where it is, sets up persistence so it survives a reboot, and then likely downloads and runs the next stage, which, yeah, we suspect is this updated Wine Loader.
And are these two loaders related? Grape loader and wine loader.
The researchers found definite similarities, things like the code structure, how they try to hide themselves, obfuscation techniques, and how they decrypt data internally. It strongly suggests they're connected, maybe from the same developers, or using a shared toolkit.
Interesting. Okay, let's dig into grape loader a bit more. How does it work exactly? How does it get from that wine tasting email onto the system?
Right. So the phishing emails come from specific domains, researchers noted, baconhoff.com and silry.com. Clicking the link often downloads a ZIP file like wine.zip.
Clever naming.
Inside that ZIP is actually a legitimate program, like the PowerPoint viewer, maybe named wine.exe. But also hidden in there are DLL files.
DLLs, dynamic link libraries.
Exactly. They use a technique called DLL sideloading. Basically, when the user runs the legitimate wine.exe, it's tricked into loading one of the malicious DLLs hidden alongside it. In this case, one called ppcore.dll seems to be Grape Loader itself. Another DLL, API's vsubsystem64.dll, might just be there to make the legitimate program run properly.
So you think you're opening a presentation about wine.
And bam, Grape Loader is running in the background.
Okay, so it's running. What does it do then? Does it immediately call home?
Pretty much. First, it copies itself to a new location to hide better. Then it sets up persistence, usually by adding an entry to the Windows registry's run key, so it starts automatically every time the computer boots up.
Standard persistence method.
Yep. Then it collects some basic info, the computer's host name, the username, stuff like that. It bundles this up with a long, hard-coded string of characters, probably an identifier for this specific campaign.
Like a campaign ID.
Right.
Yes.
And a random number. Then it sends all that data off to its command and control server, the C2.
The C2, where the attackers control it from. Do we know where that is?
For Grape Loader, the C2 identified as hxxps.ofiber.com/blog.php. It communicates using standard HTTPS web traffic, trying to look like normal browser activity.
Okay. And you mentioned it then gets ready to run the next stage, maybe some shellcode.
Yeah.
How does it do that sneakily?
It uses a pretty clever evasion technique. It gets the shellcode from the C2, then it allocates some memory, copies the shellcode there, but immediately changes the memory permissions to no accesses.
So nothing can read or write to it.
Exactly. The idea is that any security software scanning memory might just skip over this inaccessible block. Then, after a short pause, maybe just a second or two, it changes the permissions again, this time to execute or add write, creates a new process thread, points it at the shellcode, and lets it run.
Hiding it, then quickly unhiding and running it. That's sophisticated.
It definitely makes detection harder, especially for memory scanners.
Okay, what about the other piece, this new wine loader variant? What's different about it?
This new one is also a DLL named vmtools.dll. It's quite large, lots of functions listed, though many seem to be duplicates.
vmtools.dll, does that name suggest anything?
It strongly suggests it's also deployed using DLL sideloading, possibly by exploiting a legitimate executable related to VMware tools.
So potentially another side-loading trick, just with a different legitimate program.
That seems likely. What's also interesting is that a part of its code is marked RWX read, write, execute. This usually means it can modify itself while running. Self-modifying code. Another analysis-hindering technique.
Makes it harder to figure out what it's really doing. How does it unpack itself? Does it talk to a different C2?
It uses RC4 decryption, similar to older WineLoader versions, with a hard-coded key to unpack its main components and also to decode strings internally. And yes, it has its own C2 server.
Where's that one?
Identified as hxxps.bravekup.com/view.php. It gathers similar system info as Grape loader and sends it off.
And does it try to blend in too?
It does, but in a slightly odd way. The user agent string it sends that identifies the browser, and OS claims to be a very recent version of the Microsoft Edge browser running on Windows 7.
Windows 7. But those new Edge versions don't run on Windows 7, do they?
Exactly. It's an impossible combination, which ironically might make it stand out to defenders looking for anomalies. A bit of an OPSEC slip-up, maybe.
Interesting. Maybe not perfectly stealthy there. What about defenses against analysis? Is this new wine loader tougher?
Oh, definitely. Both Grape Loader and this new Wine Loader seem to have really improved their anti-analysis game, especially with hiding text strings inside the code. Instead of just simple encryption, they now seem to use a three-step process for many strings. One function fetches the encrypted data, another decrypts it using that RC4 key, and a third function immediately wipes the decrypted string from memory after it's used.
Wow, constantly cleaning up after itself in memory.
Makes it much, much harder for analysts, both human and automated, to see what the malware is actually referencing, like C2 domains, file names, commands.
Okay, so both new tools are really doubling down on stealth and evasion. Looking bigger picture now, what does all this tell us about APT29's overall style, their tradecraft?
Their absolute dedication to stealth remains paramount. Like that podcast description said, in, out, and you'll never know we were here. That's the goal. We consistently see targeted spear phishing, often with those surprisingly mundane lures like the wine tasting. They use custom malware we know about older tools like Wellmiss, Wellmail, Goldmax, even if they weren't in this specific campaign.
And they abuse legitimate services too, don't they?
Absolutely.
Right.
Exploiting things like OF, SAML for logins, using cloud infrastructure to hide their traffic, and living off the land.
Using built-in tools like PowerShell, WMI.
Exactly. Minimizes their footprint. But their operational security, their OPSEC, is generally extreme. Segmenting infrastructure, time-based kill switches on malware, rotating tools frequently, meticulous cleanup.
Like the SolarWinds malware only being active during work hours.
Precisely. All about minimizing the chances of detection. They're patient, disciplined, and very strategic.
Okay, now, attribution. How confident are we that this is APT29 behind these recent campaigns? It's always tricky, right?
It is always tricky. Attribution is rarely black and white. However, the big one, SolarWinds, was publicly attributed to the Russian SVR, specifically naming APT29 cozy bare nobilium by both the US and UK governments back in April 2021.
Okay, so that's pretty firm for SolarWinds.
For these more recent campaigns, especially the diplomatic phishing with Grape Loader and the new Wine Loader, well, the tactics, the targeting, the reuse and evolution of Wine Loader itself, and now these code similarities and shared anti-analysis techniques between the two new loaders, it all points very strongly towards APT29. The evidence chain is compelling.
And when governments do make these public attributions, it's not just academic, is it? There are real-world consequences.
Definitely. Attributions can lead to diplomatic fallout, sanctions, expelling diplomats, international condemnation. It raises geopolitical tensions.
But clearly it doesn't always stop them.
No, groups like APT29 just adapt. They remain active. We see them shifting focus to cloud environments, finding ways around multi-factor authentication, continuing to hit diplomatic targets using things like stolen Microsoft 365 tokens and these sophisticated phishing kits. The game just evolves.
Which brings us back to why this matters. Why should our listeners care about APT29 even if they're not diplomats or working at a big defense contractor?
Because APT29 represents the cutting edge, really, of state-sponsored cyber espionage. Their campaigns show how critical infrastructure, like software supply chains, can be weaponized, how cloud services aren't inherently safe. They demonstrate that even well-defended networks are vulnerable to adversaries who are patient, skilled, and well-resourced.
And there are lessons for individuals, too, beyond the big picture.
Absolutely. Understanding their methods helps everyone be more critical online. That wine tasting invite, it's a perfect example. Seemingly harmless emails, unexpected attachments, requests that seem a little off, that could be the start of something serious. It reinforces basic cyber hygiene. Verify senders, be suspicious of links and downloads, think before you click.
So it's about building that critical mindset for everyone. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Key takeaways about APT29.
All right, key things to remember. APT29, aka Midnight Blizzard, Cozy Bear. Highly skilled, persistent threat linked to Russian intelligence. Their goal is espionage, stealing sensitive data. They use evolving, stealthy techniques, like we saw with the recent Grape loader and new wine loader targeting European diplomats. Their focus is always on evasion, adaptation, and operational security. They are a top-tier threat.
And a final thought for people to chew on after listening.
Well, given this level of sophistication and how these attacks are designed to be invisible, how can we, individuals, organizations, really stay vigilant? What are the subtle signs we might be missing, especially when we rely so much on complex digital supply chains and these everyday online interactions? It's worth thinking about. How secure are the things we take for granted, and what does true vigilance look like against an invisible enemy?
That's a great question to ponder. Definitely food for thought. Thanks for breaking all that down. It's sobering, but really important to understand.
Absolutely. It's a constant challenge.
So, to everyone listening, thanks for joining our deep dive. We hope it gives you a clearer picture of these advanced threats. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay safe out there.